Hello, welcome back to another video edition of my No Treble series. I've been having fun doing these videos, so I hope you don't mind getting away from the written articles. 9 years of weekly articles. I've written a lot of articles. So I'm doing some videos just to get some more interactive kind of vibe, more open dialogue-y type of lessons and explanations of things as I understand them. But I will ask you guys if you have any questions, topics, ideas, things you'd like me to talk about, things you'd like me to write about, things you'd like me to show or explain. Please hit the link and shoot me an email. AskDamien@notrouble.com. There should be a link right below the video. And I promise to do my best as usual. So today, I thought I would talk a little bit about intervallic patterns, essentially. We've gone over quite a few things with regard to modes and scales and arpeggios and different melodic patterns through different chord types, and I've written a lot about all of this stuff. And I think I've probably written a little bit about intervallic patterns as well. But I when thinking about, I hit a point in my practice where I was just honestly, I just like needed to take a break from scales and arpeggios and chord changes, and I was already doing a lot of stuff with rhythm, but I wanted something else other than strict pattern sequences through changes to practice harmonically. And it occurred to me that I had never really spent that much time just getting familiar with intervals in and of themselves outside of harmony. So I wanted to talk a little bit about how you can explore all of the intervals on your fretboard, and I think it's very worthwhile doing. You never know what you're going to come up with. And then beyond that, how to start trying to incorporate them into a line or lick, some kind of thing that you can actually use in the shed. So I would implore you guys, as usual, to be as thorough as possible and explore things from every angle. So that being said, chromatic scale has 12 notes, so we can hit every possible we should explore every interval within the chromatic scale, the first being the minor second. And it seems silly, maybe to some of you, what the minor second is. It's just essentially the chromatic scale. And you can just keep going up half step by half step by half step. But I realized I couldn't actually play it all that fluently without just literally walking up the fretboard and then sliding up my G string. Notice I'd never worked it out across the fretboard. And so that's when I kind of discovered I didn't have the intervals down like I thought I did. And I still don't, honestly. I swear half of this stuff I present to you guys is stuff that I very much need to work on myself. But I think that's the best way to learn for myself is trying to get this information and ideas across to other people, and that forces me to figure out how to do it myself. And I've also had a lot of success with my students by virtue of us figuring things out together. I don't pretend to know everything there is, so keep that in mind because I'm going to biff some of this stuff. So chromatic scale, minor seconds. Instead of just crawling up the fingerboard like so, let's take, I'm doing a 1 finger per fret, which helps me to visualize and keep my place. It's also good practice, technical exercise. Maybe an 8 fret span per string, or at least start with that and then move to the next string. And then we need to figure out, we're on a C, so we need to start on the C sharp. So we need to move ding, ding, ding. So when doing it that way, I discovered where I am with my pinky on a note, the next half step, if I think one finger per fret, I have pinky, ring, index, middle, index, and then I need to go one fret further down. So essentially a 5 fret span between half steps across strings. One finger per fret plus 1. So that's when I figured that out. And this is just like all little like aha moments that once you combine them all together, it helps to further flush out your understanding of the fretboard. So I'm doing, one finger per fret, and then stretching over an extra. And I learned something. Minor seconds. Major seconds. This, many of you may already know, will give you the whole tone scale, which is a 6-note scale per octave. There's 6 whole tones per octave. Interesting thing about this, visually, I'm a very visual guy, so as far as the shape goes, is there's no perfect fourths. Everything is at an angle. If you're playing whole steps between the dots, on the next string they're going to be on the dots, and then however you want to think about it. I've always said there is no wrong way to think about it if it helps you understand something correctly. You got to make sure you're not taking any shortcuts. Make sure you're not internalizing wrong information. But as long as you are internalizing the information and understanding it, feel free to do it. Have your own method. That was my biggest problem in music school and working through books, is I tended to not understand things in the same way they did. So I just wound up being more confused afterwards than I was before I started. It wasn't until I actually just started really working on this stuff hard on my own, and I always took occasional lessons from piano players and guitar players to try and get new ideas and see things through their eyes. And I specifically chose non-bass players because I figured piano players, who better to ask about harmony and scales and all that stuff. So seek out the information, figure it out in a way that makes sense to you, and drill it. So, I digress again. Major seconds, and I think it's not the worst idea to just take it a couple octaves up across the neck. If you play a 4-string and you only do 1 octave, you're really only seeing a fraction of the picture. So if you can really figure out a few ways to play each of these things, then you'll have a better map of it on your fretboard. So major seconds, whole tone scale, one and the same. That is the scale that we would often use over a dominant 7 sharp 5 chord. There are other scales we could choose to use over that, but that's kind of the common go-to jazz guy scale for a dominant 7 sharp 5 or augmented chord. There are other options. There's always more than one scale you can choose for any chord. Now we're on minor thirds. This actually gives us a diminished pattern. Again, trying to find a few different ways to finger it across the fretboard. And I'm not worried about harmony. I might mention, oh, this works great over this chord or whatever, but I'm just thinking intervals. I'm not even worried about harmony. Once I get comfortable with the intervals, then I start exploring how to utilize them against a drone or a chord or something, in a harmonic context. But for now, I'm just thinking intervals and try to, pay attention to the sound I get. familiarizing myself with the sound of the intervals and what happens when I essentially just stack them, you know, up the musical staff. What does that sound like? As we get to the larger intervals, especially on a 4-string, we can't just keep going up. We'll need to change registers, drop octaves, and then we'll get some interesting patterns along the way. So major thirds. I just keep starting on my open E string. It's my lowest note. This one, this is one where we could, if we change the register of it, we just wind up playing, because when you do major thirds, there's only 3 notes before you hit the octave again. It's a 3-note scale, in a sense. But get familiar with the sound of that interval. Recognize the shape of it, a little diagonal line. Get the sound, figure out a few ways to play them from low to high, you're golden. Fourths. This is one where we quickly run out of room. If I start on my E string, now playing fourths, we can go through every note of the chromatic scale. You've heard of the cycle of fifths, cycle of fourths. A fourth up is the same as a fifth down. So the cycle of fourth is just the cycle of fifths in the other direction, or pink. So moving through the cycle of fourths, we hit every note of the chromatic scale. Starting on an E, A, D, G, C. Above C is an F, B flat, E flat, A flat, D flat. Above D flat is G flat, C flat, B natural, E, A, D. I'm trying to think and talk at the same time. G, C, F, B flat, E flat. Did I already do all these? I don't know, because I just came up with a pattern that allowed me to change the register and play it in kind of a squirrely way instead of, you know, instead of jumping. Went all the way to the top, B flat, moving to an E flat. I could just go to my E flat there, but I wanted to try and move up the fretboard. So once I got to my B flat, I realized, okay, I'd hit an E flat. I'm holding it out with my index finger, E flat on the A string with my pinky, fourth. Remember I said a fourth is just a fifth inverted. So instead of going up a fourth, I'm going down a fifth, up a fourth. And then I realized, again, down 2 strings and over 4 frets. Down 2 strings over 4 frets. Down a string, up a fourth. So I just discovered a new pattern. And that's the benefit of trying to work through this stuff. So that's one way I could play it. I'm sure there's more, but we have 12 intervals, and I wanted to try and get some applicable ideas in there as well. So I'll just kind of blaze through kind of quickly, but I just want to impart the concept, and you guys take it from there. Now, just a perfect fourth, so now sharp fourth, also known as the tritone. 1, 2, 3, because 3 whole steps, 3 full tones, 3 tones gives you that face. Now, just like our major thirds, this is a very short scale if only played strictly. And there's our octave. It's a 2-note scale. It perfectly bisects the octave. There's 3 more tones, and you have the octave from the tritone. So we could play with patterns. Again, getting to know the shape. it's the mirror image of the major third shape. It's a diagonal line going this way, but also getting that sound. That's a very crunchy kind of sound. It kind of catches the ear, and it's a cool sound. And when we get into taking these intervals and moving them in intervals of their own, taking two tritones and moving them in whole steps, which is the kind of stuff we'll get into in a second, that's when you can come up with some pretty cool lines and ideas. So just understand the tritone, know what it sounds like. Fifths. I've gotten a lot of mileage out of stacking fifths. I usually use some open strings and some other things to work them, and I often only stack a couple of fifths and then move that stack around in intervals and get kind of and with open strings and pull-offs to make it easier to finger. But you can also just kind of move them around. But again, get to know that sound. Fifths are very useful when it comes to creating chords too. Sorry, I just had a big old smoothie. One of my favorite chord shapes, chord sounds on the bass, is the minor 9 chord. It's a really dark, pretty sound. And how I'm getting that is essentially I'm kind of borrowing that minor 10th, playing the root. This is a C and an E flat. And then from the C, I'm just stacking, playing the 5th, and then another 5th above that gives me the 9, or D. I'm playing C, G, D, E flat. And that's what gives it that kind of dark, the little bit of crunch in that chord is that minor 9 interval. So it's a super consonant, solid, stacked sound with a minor 9 on top, and it's a lovely sound. Just moving it in whole steps from C to E to D and back down. That's all that was. So get to know the 5th. You can practice trying to play them through all 12 notes. Like I said, cycle of fifths will get you through the chromatic scale. If I start on my E string, 5th, B, F sharp, C sharp, now I need to move to G sharp. Sus chord sound. That's how I remember. If I want to go up a 5th from the top note, from the top string, I can go down to the bottom string, 2 frets down. Gives me a sus chord or minor 11 kind of sound, and that's how I think of it. Just move to the root of my sus, which is not an accurate way to think of it, but that, again, if it works, it works. So if you want to stack them like that, I find repeating lines gives me a chance to pivot. So going 2 frets over, 4 strings down. Going 1, 5, 9, 1, 5, 9 gives me a chance to pivot my hand. Pivot again. Pivot, 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 pivot. Now we can play stacked fifths across as many octaves as you like. So that's kind of a cool thing. Now minor sixths. This isn't one I have spent a lot of time on, so you'll probably see me thinking while I do this. So minor sixth, the shape I initially think of is like a major 6 from the scale. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Half step down. 2 frets over, 2 strings up, down towards the floor. Unless you're playing a righty, lefty. So minor 6th up is the same as a major 3rd down. So no matter what our top strings, and I've explained this in past articles, but when thinking about the inversion of intervals, it is all about the number 9. if you say you're playing, well, playing a minor sixth up, and you think, what do I need to move down to the same note that's a minor sixth up? You just think, 9 minus 6 equals 3. I'm playing a minor 6, so now invert the minor and the major, and you get a major 3. A minor 6 up is a major 3 down. Perfect fourths and perfect fifths are both perfect, so a fourth up is a fifth down. Major second up is a minor second seventh down. Minor seventh up is the same as a major sorry, minor seventh up is a major second down. So that's how that works. Subtract 9, the interval from 9, and then flip any major and minor, and you get it. Voila. So minor sixths, E, C, and then A flat. From A flat we have an E. I also like this shape. 1 string down, 4 fret span. So there I was realizing, okay, I'll start on a G here. Minor sixth up, playing that shape. Then I can't go up anymore unless I just jump way up here. So instead I'll go a minor third down, or a major third down. Sorry, I'm going to keep doing that. So I'm going G, E flat, major third down is B. So it just takes a little bit of a quick shift. But with not that much practice, you'd be able to make that shift pretty consistently. So there, I just learned another intervallic relationship. I hadn't thought of that before. Major sixth. I like the sound of major sixth. I was very into practicing my scales in broken sixths. I just thought that was cool, and I found it to be kind of a useful pattern, an interesting sounding way to get from low to high. So major sixths. Again, starting on the C, A, F sharp, or major 6 up, minor third down. Major 6 up, minor third down. Major 6 up, minor third down. So familiarize yourselves with that sound, with that shape. Try and find some patterns. I like mixing and matching my minor and major sixths along with other intervals to just get me coming back down the fretboard so I can go back up. And then minor sevenths. I'm just going to hit them all because I might as well. Say starting a C, B flat, and minor sevenths, it's the same thing as a major second. We can actually just kind of, if we're changing the octave, it's just really the whole tone scale again, but, you know, descending. But familiarize yourself with the sound of a minor seventh up, because that is a major portion of many chords, minor chords, dominant chords, half diminished chords. It's a major part of the sound of a lot of things we play. So get that sound in your head. Know what that sounds like. Major seventh up, minor second down, chromatic scale descending. So it's really, those intervals are really more about getting the sound of the interval in your head. Major 7, major chord, very harmonious. just like that. The tension between the 9 and the flat 3 gave us a little bit of a crunch on that minor 9 chord. The tension between the root and the major 7th, which are really a half step apart, just separated by an octave, gives us a little bit of a tension, which helps to make the sound just a little richer, a little more, instead of what, root 3rd, 5th. So there you go. Those are the intervals. Now, let's talk for a second about how to try and turn those into some kind of lick or line. Side note, I was just about to start trying to come up with a lick for you guys, and I remembered that I think Kai Eckhart has a video. He's an old teacher of mine from back when I lived in the Bay Area. World-class player. If you guys aren't familiar with Kai, you guys need to check him out. K-A-I-E-C-K-H-A-R-D-T, I believe. His kind of breakout thing was John McLaughlin Trio with Treble to live at the Royal Festival Hall is a kind of a classic album that everybody should check out. He's phenomenal. God, I think he was like, I don't know, 19 or something when he did that tour. It's ridiculous. He's a phenomenal player. Got some really interesting chordal slapping rhythmic stuff that you guys should check out. But I do remember him doing a video where he had set patterns for working every interval up and down the fretboard, which I am going to seek out myself because I need to explore that a little more right along with you. I just wanted to do a basic breakdown of the intervals. I only really consciously go for a few of them when I'm coming up with a line on a gig or something. But Kai he's really mapped out his process well, and he has a lot of established patterns for things he worked on this shed. So, a little bit of coffee. Third cup's the charm. All right, so let's come up with some licks. So when I think intervallically, I very well may be abandoning harmony altogether for a little bit. And I've talked about, many of you may have seen the video on how to play outside. And I talk about how you essentially need to start from a place of consonants, although this is maybe the least important part. The two important parts are context and resolution. What you play that's outside of the harmony ideally will have some kind of context. It'll make some kind of sense in and of itself. Whether it's an intervallic relationship, whether it's a completely different harmony that you're playing, it's just random, random just sounds random. But when you do something that has context, your ear goes, oh, that's doing something. I don't know exactly what it is, but it's doing something, and it's outside the harmony. And it goes, that's a little tense. And then, context, resolution. Then when you stick the landing, then the people's brains go, but it was cool. So it's all about giving what you're doing some kind of context and then resolving it well. Just sewing it into your line effortlessly, seemingly effortlessly. The more thousands of hours in the shed you have, the more effortless it will seem. So, hear a lot of bands say, they get called an overnight sensation. And they go, yeah, it took us 12 years to get here, but we're an overnight sensation. Same thing holds true with working out a lot of this stuff in the shed and agonizing over it. And then, finally you can do it, and it sounds like it's just flowing out of you. It's not. People work on things for hours and hours and hours. So, let's come up with a lick. E minor. Been rocking the E. So let's continue to rock the E. So when coming up with a lick, sometimes I'll just free play and try and experiment a little bit. When I first got into intervals, I needed to kind of decide ahead of time what I was going to do. So for the purpose of this, I'm going to start on from a place of tension my first note outside, I'll start on a B flat over an E minor chord. And let's take an intervallic pattern and move that in an intervallic pattern. So let's take our nice diagonal line, our major thirds, say descending. Now, that's not enough. You could do that, that's fine. But I'm going for something a little more extended, something to really go, I'm outside and I'm back. So let's do that with the pivot. Make it a little easier to finger. It also gives us more notes, more bang for our buck. And let's move that in whole steps. Starting on a B flat, G flat, D, G flat, D, B flat, and then starting on a C, A flat, E, A flat, E, C. And there's our octave. Hey, that worked. So let's see. I'll have to experiment a little bit to see what feels natural and what makes sense. That's a funny little exercise. Something like that. Figure out how to resolve it. A little shorter. That might be cool. Alright, we'll go with that for now, just for expediency. In the shed, I might spend an entire hour coming up with a few patterns and trying to figure out how to work them into a groove, but I won't I won't do that here. So basically I'm just establishing the harmony in my head, so I might play the groove through a few times, and that's why I hit the chords, just to kind of go, yeah, we're in E minor. So I got to make sure I stay in 4. Alright, so I want to make sure that I stay in 4. I've actually come up with a lot of interesting odd metered grooves and licks unintentionally by just picking a pattern and throwing it into a line and then realizing, oh, that's in, 15. So let me see where this. So if I started on the downbeat and play that exact pattern, I end it coming back to my landing point on the 2. So maybe let's try it starting on the 4, so I land on the 1. 1, 2, 3, 4. 3. Starting on the 4 feels a little funny to me. So I mean, I don't have to land on the 1. I just wanted to make sure it feels natural and it wouldn't be something that would throw people off. 2, 3, 4. So I started on the end of 1 and kind of shortened it a little bit. Let's bump the tempo up a little bit. 1, 2, 3, 4, groove for bar. Shorten. So that's a functional little lick. It's not something I would play every bar like that, but that's how I would practice it to get it comfortable. That kind of a pattern might do well to be extended a little longer, maybe start in the middle of a bar, come back on the downbeat. It could do any number of things, and I would experiment by coming up with a length. Like that's kind of a short version. Practice putting it on everywhere on the beat, starting it on the end of one, starting it on the two, starting it on the end of two, starting it on the three, and seeing how it lays, how it feels, what it does. And then if I find one that, like the way it starts, I go, oh my God, that sounds amazing, starting on the end of three, but it doesn't resolve in the right place, then I might experiment with expanding that lick to make it resolve where I want it to resolve. And it doesn't even have to resolve to the root necessarily, it just has to resolve strongly. And obviously you could have the line end on the third of the chord an octave up and then play the root, and that would wind up sounding even cooler, possibly. I just completely kind of made that up, trying to give an example. But you know, I'll take a little idea with that like that and run with it for a while, see what happens. All right, so let's do one more pattern, one more lick. I guess we'll keep it in E minor. That's kind of using a lot of the patterns. I like that. That's kind of a pattern I've played before. It comes naturally to my fingers. I'm thinking G major. I'm thinking relative major here. So I'll just go ahead and show you what I just did. I started from the 7th of my relative major, F sharp, sliding into the G, played a natural 6, then down a major third, which gives me 6, 4, 1, 3, 7. Actually, I slid into the 4, 7, F sharp, G, E, C, G, B, C, F sharp, or 7, 1, 6, 4, 1, 3, 4, 7. That's kind of neat. Maybe that would sound nice an octave up, so I wind up, I'm ending on the 9 from my tonic. I'm ending on an F sharp. It's the 7 of a G major, but I'm actually playing in E minor. So I'm ending on the 9 of the chord that's actually happening. Might sound nice if I do it up an octave. That actually sounds kind of nice. And it's it's totally, that's not outside at all. We're actually using almost all the notes of E major. There is a C natural in there instead of a C sharp. You could call it harmonic major. Harmonic major is the major scale with a flat 6. Oh no, wait, but we were in E minor, not E major. Well, there you go, something for free. Harmonic major, major scale with a flat 6. I was getting confused because I was thinking G major, but we're actually in E minor. So, yeah, so actually natural minor, that's totally diatonic with the natural minor, E natural minor. Sorry, had a brain fart there for a second. But this, you know, I try and think of this stuff in a number of ways, and sometimes I confuse myself, and I need to do the math a little bit in my head. So again. just doing a kind of a simple groove. I'm not focusing on making the groove extra cool. I just want to figure out how to incorporate that lick. I'll start playing around with a couple of ideas. The first time I extended it a little bit because I didn't want it to stop there, and I brought it back down to the root. So, in a nutshell, and it's an abbreviated version of how I spent some time getting away from strict chords and arpeggios and harmonic exercises and playing around with intervals, trying to get familiar with intervals, trying to learn how to hear intervals, and then trying to turn them into licks. Just kind of thinking, here's an intervallic stack or a shape or whatever it is, and I'm going to move that in other intervals, and then I'm going to try and pay attention to what note I actually land on and resolve it back to whatever tonality I have going in my head. So I hope that made sense, and that it's at least a little bit useful to at least a couple of you. But right on. As always, thank you guys for watching and for paying attention to my ramblings and letting me practice on video. All right. Hope you guys are well. See you soon.